Hello and welcome to Founders Amplified, where we spotlight underrepresented founders who are driving innovation and impact across various industries and sectors across the globe. I'm your host, Narayan Kulkarni, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Today's guest is Sally Chen. Sally Chen is a co-founder of Atalanta Climate. Originally from Beijing, China, and now based in Vancouver, Canada, as a first-gen immigrant, female founder, racial minority, and proud University of Toronto alum, Sally is a stereotypical U of T alum. Gritty, nerdy, over-caffeinated, never quite polished enough, but always building. Atalanta Climate creates home and office-based direct air capture devices, lowering indoor CO2 concentration, boosting productivity, and permanently sequestering the captured CO2 as a rock dust. At scale, the technology will take out megatons of CO2 from the air. So, now that you know a little bit about Sally, let's dive in to the conversation.
Ooh.
Welcome to Founders Amplified, Sally. Great to have you with us. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. It's a nice warm day in Vancouver here, so it's really nice.
Amazing. Again, thanks for being here. Super excited for our conversation. But just to kick things off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. Can you tell me a little bit about what led you to become a founder and if there were any particular moments or experiences that sparked that decision?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've known that I was going to start a company from like the really beginning, kind of like graduating out of university. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And for the past 10 years, mostly it's been like more software, more of the software world. And then I thought I was always gonna like do a software company until in 2020, I got stuck in the San Francisco Orange Day. And so I woke up and the sky turned orange. And then I was like, whoa, like, I don't know if I want to actually do a software company. Maybe I should work on something that's more impactful. And so at the time, I was running US BizOps for Shopify. And then and Shopify at the time was starting to invest in a lot of like sustainability focused climate tech companies. So I was like, I didn't realize that world even existed. And this is like probably the turning point for me personally, where I was like, I think I'm just going to spend the rest of the time like focusing on climate instead of focusing on software or anything else. And then from there, I started to go to like more academia conferences to learn more about the chemical engineering piece that I like just never really had a chance to learn about. And then there, at one of the academia conferences, I met my co-founder who was at the time a postdoc at Stanford. And he spent most of his research on like doing water filtration and carbon removal. And I thought that was really cool. And we started talking about it more. And we started talking about how carbon removal is not like scaled quickly enough. And climate science is like very obscure to most people. And so we started talking about this concept of like, why don't we just like roll it out to everybody so that people can like directly engage with it. And that's kind of like sets the foundation of the company like 2 years after that.
Amazing. So it sounds like your co-founder has like a postdoc scientific background, but I'm curious a little bit more about your background, your identity, and how those you think give you a unique edge in what you're doing with Atalanta Climate.
Yeah, for sure. So I came to Canada when I was 15 from China. So I was born and raised in China. Then I came to Canada as an immigrant, and it was obviously like its own struggle, like new language, new everything. Everything was so new. But I think that gave me a lot of like different perspectives, right? Like you like naturally come with like international perspectives, and there's like different things that you kind of like value diversity more, both in the team like nowadays, and also just like in perspectives in general. I think that brings a really good unique sort of advantage when it comes to setting up the team. And then the other thing is also that being a woman, it has always been I've always been told that like, you know, women raise less in the startup world, women founders are fewer, and all of that. But I think being a woman also gives like again like unique perspectives, right? So because we and I think in the climate world especially like we as women we come with like a lot of like kind of nurturing perspectives when it comes to like the planet and when it comes to kind of like extending essentially like the human species. And so we like naturally care more about climate and nurturing and like helping the world continue and helping the our environment to be better for our future generations. So I think that's also a very good sort of like motivation for me to like continue down this path, even though like starting a startup is really difficult and everything is you know chaos sometimes, but I think that just sets a very good foundation and very good motivation.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. I appreciate hearing that. Can you tell me more about your professional background and how that gives you a unique edge in what your specific role is in Atalanta Climate?
Yeah, so I spent the last 10 years mostly running different software startups and like mostly in business operations. So business operations is a very interesting, like I think unique department within or maybe not department, maybe like a function within a startup, because you kind of touch all the different teams and then you don't actually like specialize on anything, but it's more like the internal kind of consultant sort of role. So that's a really cool perspective when it comes to like running my own startup, because now I'm like, oh, I think I know what we're lacking in marketing. I know what we're lacking in sales. And so that's like a really it's almost like it feels like a 10-year training before I actually jump into my own journey. But at the same time, I think there was like a lot of mistakes that were learned along the ways, and we're like, let's run this experiment and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And because of being like an internal kind of consultant role, I really get to live my own consequences in terms of what decisions were made. And so I think that was very, very helpful learning and just like knowing that, you know, doing something could lead to a potentially really good or potentially really bad result, and then learning from the result, but then also learning about kind of more so the underlying philosophy of why that happened. So I think all of that was really helpful.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. So I know that like you're doing direct air capture, and like you're doing that in a really unique way. And I'm sure a lot of people they wonder like what exactly that is. So can you tell me a little bit about like the uniqueness of what Atalanta Climate does and some things people often ask about what you do and kind of how you tell them
Yeah,
about, okay, this is what makes us unique. Because I'm sure you
yeah,
probably get a lot of questions around that.
for sure, for sure. I think so. We basically build air purifiers that like lower indoor CO2 concentration and reverse climate change. And so how that works is the outside CO2 concentration is like 420 ppm, and the inside sometimes it's like 1,000, sometimes it's 2,000, sometimes it gets like 3 to 4,000. I actually met someone at Climate Week a few weeks ago, and then he did this research in his like university dorm room, and it was like constantly hitting like 4,000 to 5,000 ppm in terms of CO2 concentration indoor. And it's really crazy. And most people don't realize, but like there's a bunch of Harvard research that will tell you like the moment it crosses like 1,000 ppm, it starts to like screw up your kind of functional your cognitive function, and then it like drops your productivity by up to 101%, and it drops your sleep quality by up to 80%. So it's the CO2 concentration is like not just a climate thing, but also a health thing for indoor. Um, and so what we do is that we capture that like indoor CO2 concentration, and then we permanently convert that into a limestone rock dust, and everything happens within the device that is a plug and play. So one of the things that's cool about that is that it like because it lowers your CO2 concentration, it boosts your productivity. But then the other side of it is that if we capture the CO2 in the outdoor world, it's less efficient than if we capture it inside, because the inside CO2 concentrations a lot of times it's like 3 to even 10 times higher.
That's
Also,
amazing.
the
Yeah.
question that you had about common questions that we get asked. Actually, quite a bit. Well, one of the things that people ask me is uh, why do you capture it indoor? And I think I just talked about that just now in terms of like it being more efficient. And then the other thing is a lot of people don't realize that like when you have like standard air purifiers that like that's on the market right now, they don't do anything about CO2 concentration. They're like mostly more focused on like hard particles, versus like the CO2 concentration piece is more of like a chemical capture instead of like a physical capture. And then the other question I often get is like, how does this compare to my plants indoor? So like plants are amazing and like you should definitely have them. We are about like we're about like 30 to 40 trees, like full grown trees, indoor when it comes to CO2 capturing capacity. And each of the trees are like 100 to 200 plants. So that's like a really great, it's like thousands of plants filled in your room, or like just kind of like being like feeling in essentially in the forest in your study or in your bedroom when it comes to CO2 concentration or CO2 capturing.
Interesting. Very cool. And so you mentioned the rock dust that you capture. How is that like unique and what are the can you tell me more about like the things that people do with that and why that might be interesting for like as an interesting part of your solution relative to others?
Right. Right. So so essentially we capture the CO2 and then permanently turn it into limestone rock dust, which is commonly used as like a natural fertilizer for just thousands of years of like human history, just from like back in the days when we're still like, settlers and we're just figuring out agriculture. It started to be used as like a soil amendment tool and also fertilization. So safely, like you can safely use it as your fertilization for your backyard or your plants at home. But at the same time, it's also just like a natural ingredient that exists everywhere. So our buildings are built with it, and it's like literally everywhere. So it can safely go into compost as well if you don't have as many plants or as many like backyard items to take care of. And then I think one of the things that's kind of unique about our solution is like you'll hear about all of these like gigantic direct air capture plants that are like doing geological sequestration and like kind of are in the middle of nowhere and taking up like some non-arable land. Obviously, those are amazing solutions, and we should have everything. But the uniqueness in terms of our tech is that we don't need to do any like so a lot of the reasons why like these solutions these industrial solutions have to be industrial scale is because they're using materials that are not like exactly a good fit for a home and office usage. We are using materials that are completely safe, and then we also don't need to heat up the sorbent in any way, shape, or form. Don't need to use pressurized tank or anything like that. So the whole process happens room temperature with electricity and with a consumable salt disk. And there is no, essentially the whole piece happens within a very modular, small sort of device. So we essentially made like a tech improvement that allows it to be done in a home and office environment.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I want to dig deeper into something that you mentioned earlier, which was reduction of emissions and also productivity. So it sounds like what you're doing has a multifaceted impact. But let's like fast forward to say like 5, 10 years in the future. What are some like impacts, like say like those at scale or other impacts you see that show people that Atalanta climate and your machines are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so on the machine itself, we put in two sensors, and one is the sensor at the input CO2 concentration, and the other one's at the output. So you can see from the device itself that it's going to reduce like whatever CO2 concentration you have to like about 100 to 200 ppm. So that is essentially like 1960s, 1970s air in terms of CO2 concentration. So that's one thing that we already do. And the other thing that we are doing right now is to build a portal that kind of tracks over time how much CO2 you have captured, like just in the lifetime of you using the device. So and we're trying to put that into like a community leaderboard as well. So you can like compare against like your neighbors and like just geographically how much CO2 has been captured by everybody, just to make it like, fun and engaging. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is essentially to kind of um, show what is happening in terms of like chemical reactions in the belly of the device, so that it's a, like I said in the very beginning, it's a very engaging way of like people interacting with climate science directly. So you get to see the air turning into liquid and then turning into a rock dust. So we think that's like a really cool thing to show. And also for just education purposes, like we were thinking that if along the way we inspire a couple like children to want to become chemical engineers and like help solve the world problems, that would be great success on top of, you know, just scaling carbon removal to the world.
Wow, that's amazing. I love hearing, of course, not only the ability to see it in real time, but to the point you just talked about, education, inspiring both, of course, people to learn about climate, but also like the engineering aspect. That's really cool. I think more broadly, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. In your view, where do you see like direct air capture solutions, like the broader like populace being aware of like climate solutions and like the type of technology that you're doing? Where do you see that like trend going into the future, and where do you see Atlanta climate fitting into that?
Yeah, for sure. I think so historically we've mostly been focused on kind of like a government push towards doing more climate solutions, and corporations and like industrial solutions like doing a push towards like better climate solutions and more innovative climate solutions as well. I think the part that's really missing is like individuals and just like kind of even introducing individuals to these different solutions. There was a early on kind of user research that we did across New York City and Vancouver, and we're kind of like interviewing people on the street, and we're like, have you heard about, like, do you care about climate change? And most people were like, yes, this is a huge problem. But when we asked about like, have you heard about any of the climate solutions? Like, what do these things do? Have you heard about enhanced rock weathering? Have you heard about direct air capture? Nobody knows what's going on. It's like 0% of the people knew that that could even happen. Most people were like, I think recycling is the only thing that I could do, or like switching my car to an EV is the only thing that I could do. But both of these, like in the climate world, both of these are like avoidance emissions, like not like removal, right? So most people like don't even realize that the removal methods exist. So that's, I think that's our mission in terms of kind of like scaling it out to the people. And we really think that it's going to create a flywheel from there, where when once individual people learn more about climate solutions, they're better educated to like look at corporate solutions and what the corporations are doing, and the corporates then become more incentivized to invest more into climate solutions, which then incentivize the individual people to like, you know, to do more climate solutions, and then it goes into a positive flywheel that way where we can amplify impact. I think that the piece that's missing in today's picture really is the component that the individual people just don't know about what's going on. So that's the part that we're trying to work on.
I see. I appreciate hearing that. Like you're, it sounds like you're putting emphasis on great raising awareness for individuals, getting them involved, and then creating a virtuous cycle, which then goes with industry, and then over time, like scaling up into and leading into a much greater positive impact. And that's amazing. And so I think as I've heard you share, heard you talk about say your journey, talk about what you're doing. It sounds like there's been a lot of things you've learned, and
Yeah.
particularly, I want to start with this part. Like it sounds like the technology development in itself has been an interesting process, and then bringing that out into like an actual product. So I'm curious with that part of just taking the technology from like a concept. I know you've talked about your co-founder doing a lot of that, and then working with you, and then bringing that out into real life. What does that process look like, and how? What have been some of the interesting things you've learned along the way of turning it from like concept technology in the lab into real life?
Yeah, for sure. I think the technology, like you said, like I think we spent like 1 year early on to like validate the tech and all that. So just like the piece of me trying to pick up the super technical like side of things, and then my co-founder trying to translate that into like more layman terms for me, I think has been a learning process just in that alone. And then throughout the process, we also learned that it's actually incredibly difficult to explain something as almost like as complicated and obscure as climate science to something that like the greater kind of population will understand. So that's actually one of the bigger challenges, like in the beginning, that we had run into. So my co-founder, like I said, is like a Stanford postdoc, and then he's now a Georgia Tech professor in environmental engineering. And so he obviously like thinks in a very technical format, and there's like all these really cool stuff that he's working on. But then it's like this idea of translating it into something that just like a standard human would understand, right? And then also my like we're our extended team, like we have a hardware engineer who has like spent the last 20 years designing really complex medical devices and like building aircraft carrier components and stuff like that. And he also like has a very kind of like technical like insight into how we build these devices. And it's almost like in terms of the interior design is almost like robotics. And it's again like how to translate that from just like the technical concept being very, very complicated into something that is like simple for people to use in terms of UX. I think that just that entire kind of like philosophy around how do we convert something that's extremely complicated into something that's both easy to understand and easy to interact with, and something that sparks interest, so that if people want, they can dig into it further. So I think that has been a really good, I guess, learning process for us to kind of like grow in our journey of running the startup as well.
It's amazing. It sounds like both from them translating the science for you or for others on your team to understand, and then translating that into how like your customers can understand it. That process of like turning complex things into a more simple form while still retaining the depth of it. It sounds like that's been a really interesting and empowering process. I'm also curious about the process of building your business and things like fundraising, things like getting like traction, visibility, etc. What have been some learning areas or things that you've learned in that operational part of running your business?
Right. I think so because my career has mostly been me being in BizOps, and BizOps is like this function that you introduce when you have like 10 plus people. So I've like never seen the business from like 0 to 1. I've always been the person who kind of like built it from 1 to like 100 or with 1,000. And so I think that initial that I totally underestimated. I've heard about it from other founders before, like of how difficult it is, but I've totally underestimated in terms of how difficult it actually is when it comes to actually doing it like ourselves. But I think it's a very humbling experience to go through that in the beginning, and knowing that it's business is a series of experimentation, right? So like especially before product market fit, you're like, how do I like message it so that it makes sense to the customer? How do I message it so that it makes sense to the investor? How do I like build the product so that it like matches the expectation? Like, what do people actually want? And then when it comes to more of the operational side of it, like fundraising is basically like a B2B sales process as well, right? It's also about messaging, and it's also about kind of like getting that relationship to the place it needs to be before you kind of close around, and also building trust and all that. So I think there's like a lot of there's a lot of learning just in the sense of like how do we get this from like 0 to 1, and like how many experiments must be run before we get from 0 to 1, and understanding that a lot of these experiments will not result in like a positive result, but that still is a lot of learning, so that like you just make as many you just fail as many times as possible until you get to like the correct or the success that you're eventually looking for. But just like understanding that takes time and that takes tries before that happens. So I think that's probably like a generic learning that everybody has, but I think it's just like when that happened to me, like real time, like myself, I think that was a very like, I think it's like not just startup, but also just like a personal growth piece.
Well said. Appreciate hearing that. It sounds like there has been a different type of learning experience from like your professional experience relative to startups, and it sounds like being able to actually feel a lesson that you have intellectually heard or learned in real life and in real time. It sounds like that has given a different type of context and appreciation of that.
Right. Right.
Something
It
else I'm curious about is so you talked about, for example, connecting people who are less familiar with climate science, less familiar with climate in general, and telling them about your solution. I'm curious, have you learned anything about, or what have been some interesting experiences you've had when trying to sell your solution to people who are already professionals in climate tech, whether they're climate tech investors, people who are in climate, but they're less immediately aware of the way that you're solving your problem? What have you learned when engaging with them, trying to explain what you're doing? Anything that's been surprising along that way, along
Yeah,
that path, or in that way of doing that?
but both of the paths are really surprising for us. But like now looking back, I think like both of the learnings make a lot of sense. But in when we are actually carrying out the experiments, that was when we were like, whoa, did not know that was going to happen. I think with people who are already like a part of the climate world, we are essentially a new philosophy when it comes to how carbon removal is done, right? So we're like looking at it from a very decentralized format versus a lot of the existing solutions are more like centralized and like in one spot. And we believe that both need to exist to like really accelerate it, like I kind of explained with like the flywheel and all that. But that concept is new to a lot of like investors and also just people who are in the space. Because there's been like so many like major direct air capture plants. There's been so many like major enhanced rock weathering, and those are like kind of proven paths versus we're kind of like going down a journey where it's like like opening up a new category almost. So that like philosophical change is like it throws people off sometimes and they're like, oh whoa, I don't know, like is that even working? And so that has been a lot of like what we've been getting from the climate world. And when it comes to the non-climate world, like people who are completely outside of climate, when we were first explaining the product and our services, we were mostly talking about collective climate action, which makes sense to a lot of people, but it's like not personal and not engaging enough for them to actually like make a step towards that. So now, as you can see, like when I'm explaining the product, I mostly talk about the personal like health component, and then kind of like putting the climate on top as the cherry on top. So that's it's exactly the same like technology and same like in terms of how we build the product is the same thing, but it's just like explaining it in a way that feels engaging and like that really like plug people's world into this action of carbon removal. So that has become a lot more kind of it's just like it's easier to explain to people. It's like easier to make them feel part of the solution instead of like something that feels like I don't know if my personal steps actually help sort of feeling.
Great. It's cool to hear how you've communicated with them, the value of your solution, how to get involved. Now, I have a question related to this.
Yeah.
What are ways in which people can get involved with your work, and how can people follow you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think you have my QR codes and links and everything. And then I obviously like very very excited for people to learn about our solutions and what we're doing. We are at the moment so our product is launching in September for the next generation that we're building. And then we'd love to look for corporate pilot partners, like if anyone's interested. So we're looking for essentially offices and hotels that are interested in piloting this together. We're already in conversation with quite a few, but always looking to do more. And then on top of that, if you're an individual person and you're interested in like signing up to our newsletter so that we like let you know when when the B2C side comes out, please feel free to sign up on our website as well, which I think you have the link to that as well. And then lastly, if you are a investor or if you're a partner who like wants to get in touch and just learn more and see if there's a way to collaborate, we'll post my email as well so you can reach out to me.
Cool. Thank you, Sally. Now it's time for our signature question. So could
Yeah.
you please fill in the blank? I amplify.
I amplify well, many things. I think I amplify people's knowledge about climate science. I amplify the acceleration to reversal of climate change and the acceleration of carbon removal. But I think also like I think I amplify this idea of like doing something that's good for the greater public and not just something that is like that is like specific to a component, just kind of like expanding the vision to something that's like bigger for humanity.
Well said. And again, thanks so much for being with us today, Sally, and for sharing your journey in Atlanta climate and your insights. It was really cool to hear about the innovative things that you're doing and the innovative your approach you're taking to direct air capture, as well as all the positive impacts that relates, both in terms of climate, but also in broader areas like education and like how that like relates to like climate literacy and just in general like engaging people in impact. And I just want to pause and reflect on this conversation. And also, we have connected and met like, and several times had a number of different conversations. First of all, I want to celebrate you for just like being a voice, being someone who is like a woman who is like focused on climate action, someone who is like bringing forward that voice in a time where it's very much needed, and being someone who inspires people who are underrepresented. Something else that I have really appreciated, which you've touched on a little bit now, but also previously. I love the passion that you have for wanting to solve this issue and bringing both really strong business acumen into it. Operational like intelligence and smarts, as well as like communicating really eloquently about the need for the why, and also something that you talked about now, which I also want to highlight, and I really appreciate, which you've shared, which I've not seen too many people share, is really contextualizing the education aspect as a core aspect of one of the impacts that you're making in business. I think like every climate solution does that in some way. I appreciate that, like in the way that you explained it, you really highlighted that as a really important part, and particularly in the way that relates to what you're doing with Atlanta Climate. So I applaud and I want to celebrate you for all the amazing things that you do and the way that you're doing them. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you, and thank you for like amplifying our solutions out to the world by running Founders Amplified.
Much appreciated. So again, thanks so much once more for a fantastic conversation, and I look forward to being in touch, but bye for now.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Founders Amplified. I hope you're feeling as inspired as I am. If you'd like to learn more about our guests and support them, check out the show notes for their details. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating, share it with someone you know, and follow us for more inspiring episodes like this one. If you're a founder who is driving innovation and impact in any industry or sector anywhere in the world and would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Check out the show notes for more information. And finally, remember that you, yes, you, have the power to amplify the voices around you. Whether you're a colleague, family member, friend, funder, mentor, or just another fellow human, your support matters. So I invite you to celebrate and uplift the underrepresented innovators in your life who are driving innovation and impact. Let's create a better future for everyone, together. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep amplifying.